The merchant's hand slammed down on the counter with such force that dust motes exploded into the afternoon sunlight streaming through the general store's grimy windows. And Deanna Oakes felt her stomach twist into a knot tighter than any rope she had ever seen her late husband use on the cattle back when times were better. "Mrs. Oakes, I have extended you credit for 3 months now, and I have not seen a single cent," Marcus Whitley said, his thick mustache twitching with irritation as he crossed his arms over his barrel chest. "This establishment is not a charity. I have my own family to feed and my own bills to settle. No more credit, not until you pay what you already owe." Diana felt the heat rise to her cheeks, aware of the other customers in the Eagle Pass, Texas store turning to stare at the scene unfolding before them. The jar of preserves she had hoped to purchase for her children sat on the counter between them, alongside the small sack of flour and the few vegetables she had selected with trembling hands. It was May of 1878, and the spring had been particularly harsh after her husband Thomas had died in a riding accident the previous autumn, leaving her with 2 small children, a failing ranch, and debts that seemed to multiply like rabbits. "Mr. Whitley, please," Deanna said softly, her voice barely above a whisper as she fought to maintain her composure. "My children have not had a proper meal in days. I am expecting payment for some eggs I sold to the hotel at the end of the week. I give you my word that I will settle my account then." "Your word?" Whitley scoffed, shaking his head. "Madam, I mean no disrespect to your situation, but words do not pay my suppliers. Cash does. Now I will have to ask you to return these items and leave my store." Deanna felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had her pride, even if she had little else remaining. At 24 years old, she had never imagined her life would come to this moment of public humiliation. She reached for the items with shaking hands, preparing to return them to their proper places on the shelves, when a deep voice cut through the tension in the room. "How much does the lady owe?" Diana turned to see a tall man standing just behind her, his hat casting a shadow over his features. As he stepped forward into the light, she could make out more details. He was perhaps 27 or 28 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt, and eyes the color of creek water in summer, that pale green-blue that seemed to change with the light. His jaw was strong and clean-shaven, unusual for these parts where most men wore beards or mustaches. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy, his clothes showing the wear of long days in the saddle, but there was something different about him, a quiet confidence that seemed to command attention without demanding it. "I beg your pardon," Whitley said, his eyebrows rising toward his receding hairline. "I asked how much the lady owes," the stranger repeated, pulling a worn leather wallet from his pocket. "For her past account and these items here." "This is none of your concern, mister," Whitley said, though his tone had shifted from dismissive to curious. "This is between me and Mrs. Oakes. Ethan Xavier," the man said, extending his hand to the merchant, who shook it automatically. "I just signed on as foreman at the Double R Ranch outside of town, and I am making it my concern. Now, are you going to tell me the amount, or do I need to take my business to the other store down the street?" Whitley's expression changed immediately at the mention of the Double R Ranch, one of the largest cattle operations in the area. "Well, Mr. Xavier, I did not realize you were with the Double R. Let me see here." He pulled out a ledger and ran his finger down the page. "Mrs. Oakes owes $18.40 for her previous purchases. With today's items, that would bring it to $22.15. Deanna gasped. $22, but I thought it was only 15. "Interest, Mrs. Oakes," Whitley said with a shrug. I did explain that when I extended the credit. Ethan Xavier pulled out $25 and placed them on the counter with deliberate care. This covers her debt and today's purchase, with some extra for your trouble. And from now on, any purchases Mrs. Oaks makes here should be added to my account at the double R. I will settle with you monthly. Now wait just a minute, Deanna said, finding her voice despite her shock. Mr. Xavier, I cannot possibly accept this. I do not even know you, and this is far too much money to take from a stranger. Ethan turned to face her fully for the first time, and Deanna felt her breath catch in her throat at the kindness she saw in his eyes. Mrs. Oaks, I do not believe we have been properly introduced, but I know of your situation. My boss, Richard Reynolds, mentioned that you have been struggling since your husband passed. He spoke highly of Thomas Oaks and said he was a good man and a hard worker. You knew my husband? Deanna asked, her voice trembling slightly. I did not have that honor, madam, Ethan said gently. But Mr. Reynolds did, and he has been concerned about you and your children. Consider this a loan if it makes you feel better about accepting it. You can pay me back when you are able, with no interest and no pressure. A woman with 2 small children should not have to worry about where her next meal is coming from. Diana felt the tears she had been holding back begin to fall despite her best efforts. I do not know what to say, Mr. Xavier. This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me since Thomas died. No thanks are necessary, madam, Ethan said, tipping his hat to her. Mr. Whitley, please wrap up the lady's purchases and add a pound of bacon, some coffee, and whatever dried beans you have on hand. Growing children need protein. Whitley scrambled to gather the items. His earlier hostility completely evaporated in the face of ready money and the promise of future business from the Double R Ranch. Deanna stood frozen, unsure of what to do or say. She watched as Ethan Xavier added more items to her order, practical things like matches and a bar of soap, small luxuries she had not been able to afford in months. Mr. Xavier, she began, but he held up his hand. Please, madam, call me Ethan. And before you protest again, just think of your children. That is all the thanks I need, knowing they will have full bellies tonight. As Whitley packaged everything into brown paper bundles tied with string, Diana studied Ethan's profile. There was something about him that put her at ease despite the awkwardness of the situation. He was not doing this for show or to humiliate her further. His actions seemed genuine, motivated by simple human decency rather than any ulterior motive. You have a wagon, Mrs. Oaks? Ethan asked as Whitley finished wrapping the last of the items. I have a small cart outside, Deanna replied. Just enough for me and the groceries. Then let me help you load these packages, Ethan said, gathering up the bundles before she could protest. Lead the way. Deanna collected the remaining items and walked out of the store, acutely aware of Ethan following behind her and the eyes of the other customers watching their departure. Outside, the Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Eagle Pass. Her small cart was hitched to an aging mare named Buttercup, one of the few animals she had managed to keep when she had been forced to sell most of the livestock to pay Thomas's funeral expenses and other debts. Ethan carefully arranged the packages in the cart, making sure everything was secure and balanced. This is a fine horse, he said, stroking Buttercup's nose. She looks well cared for. Buttercup was Thomas's favorite, Deanna said softly. I could not bear to sell her, even when things got desperate. My son Samuel, he is only 6, but he has such a connection with her. It would have broken his heart. How old is your daughter? Ethan asked, his hands resting on the side of the cart. Lily just turned 4 last month, Deanna replied, surprised by how easy it was to talk to this stranger. She is the spitting image of Thomas, with his dark hair and brown eyes. Samuel takes after my side of the family, fair-haired and blue-eyed. They sound like fine children, Ethan said with a smile that transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable. I am sure you are doing an excellent job raising them on your own, even with the hardships you have faced. Diana felt a lump forming in her throat. It had been so long since anyone had acknowledged how hard she had been working to keep her family together. I am trying my best, but some days it feels like I am drowning and there is no shore in sight. Ethan's expression grew serious. Mrs. Oakes, I hope you will not think me too forward, but I would like to come by your property sometime soon to see if there is anything that needs mending or fixing. I am fairly handy with tools, and I imagine there are things around a ranch that get neglected when there is not a man around to tend to them. Diana bristled slightly at the implication. I am perfectly capable of handling repairs myself, Mr. Xavier. I have been managing on my own for 7 months now. I meant no offense, madam, Ethan said quickly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. I am sure you are more than capable, but sometimes having an extra pair of hands makes a job easier, that is all. And I promise I have no expectations of anything in return. I simply want to help a neighbor in need. Diana studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity or hidden motives, but found none. Finally, she nodded. I suppose I could use some help with the fence along the north pasture. Several posts came loose during the last storm, and I have not had time to fix them properly. Then I will come by on Sunday afternoon if that suits you, Ethan said. I have the day off from the Double R, and it would give me pleasure to be of service. Sunday afternoon would be fine, Diana agreed, climbing up onto the cart's seat. We live about 3 miles west of town, the small property with the white farmhouse and red barn. You cannot miss it. I will find it, Ethan assured her. You have a safe journey home, Mrs. Oakes. And please do not hesitate to purchase whatever you and your children need from Whitley's store. I meant what I said about covering your expenses. I will only buy what is absolutely necessary, Diana said firmly. I am not a charity case, Mr. Xavier, no matter how it might appear. I never thought you were, Ethan replied gently. I think you are a strong woman doing her best in difficult circumstances. There is no shame in accepting help when it is freely offered. Diana felt her cheeks warm at his words. Thank you, Mr. Xavier, for everything. I truly do not know how I will ever repay you. Just take care of yourself and those children, Ethan said, stepping back from the cart. That is payment enough. Diana flicked the reins and Buttercup began the familiar journey home. As they left Eagle Pass behind, Diana could not stop thinking about the strange encounter. Ethan Xavier had appeared like something out of a story book, riding to her rescue when she needed it most. But Diana had learned through bitter experience that fairy tales rarely came true, and she could not afford to let herself believe in them anymore. Still, as the sun beat down on her shoulders and the packages of food rustled in the back of the cart, she felt something she had not experienced in many months. A tiny flicker of hope. The farmhouse came into view as Buttercup rounded the final bend in the dusty road. Diana felt the familiar mixture of love and despair that always accompanied her first glimpse of home. The white paint was peeling badly, and the porch sagged on one side where the supports had rotted through. The barn's red paint had faded to a dull rust color, and several shingles were missing from its roof. The fences were in disrepair, and the fields that Thomas had once kept so neat and productive were overgrown with weeds. But it was home and it was hers, and she would fight tooth and nail to keep it for her children. As soon as the cart came to a stop, the front door burst open and Samuel came running out, his fair hair flying behind him. "Mama!" "Mama, you are home." Lily appeared in the doorway, thumb in mouth, her dark curls tangled around her face. Deanna's heart swelled with love for her children, even as worry gnawed at her insides about how she would continue to provide for them. "Samuel, help me unload these packages," Deanna said, climbing down from the cart. "We have food for supper tonight." Samuel's eyes widened as he peered into the cart. "Mama, that is so much food. How did you get all of this?" Deanna hesitated, unsure how to explain Ethan Xavier's generosity. "A kind man at the store helped us," she said finally. "He is going to come by on Sunday to help fix the fence." "A man is coming here?" Samuel asked, his expression shifting from excitement to suspicion. "Why would he do that?" Deanna understood her son's wariness. Since Thomas's death, several men from town had come by the farm, ostensibly to help but really to assess whether the widow Oakes might be interested in remarrying. Deanna had sent them all away with firm politeness, not ready to even consider replacing her husband, especially not with men who clearly saw her as a convenient solution to their need for a wife, rather than as a person in her own right. "He is just being neighborly, Samuel," Deanna said, ruffling his hair. "Now come on, let us get these things inside before the heat spoils anything." They worked together to carry the packages into the small kitchen, and Deanna felt her spirits lift as she unpacked the items. There was enough food here to last them at least 2 weeks if she was careful. The flour alone would allow her to make proper bread instead of the thin corn cakes they had been surviving on. The bacon was a luxury she had not dared dream of, and the vegetables were fresh and crisp. As Deanna prepared supper that evening, frying bacon in an old cast iron skillet and making biscuits with the new flour, she caught herself humming. It was the first time she had hummed since Thomas died, and the realization made her pause. Was she being disloyal to his memory by feeling happy, even for just this brief moment? But as she watched Samuel and Lily devour their supper with the enthusiasm of children who had been hungry for too long, Diana pushed aside the guilt. Thomas would have wanted his children to be fed and happy. He would have approved of Ethan Xavier's kindness, would have probably done the same thing himself if their positions had been reversed. After the children were in bed, Deanna sat on the sagging porch and looked up at the stars scattered across the Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. The night air was cooler than the day had been, carrying the scent of sage and dust and distant rain. She thought about Ethan Xavier, about the calm certainty in his voice when he had paid her debt, about the way his eyes had softened when she mentioned her children. She had not felt any kind of attraction to a man since Thomas died. Grief had wrapped around her heart like iron bands, protecting her from feeling much of anything except the daily struggle to survive. But there had been something about Ethan Xavier that had pierced through that protective barrier, just the smallest crack, letting in a sliver of light. Diana shook her head at her own foolishness. The man had done her a kindness, nothing more. She could not afford to read anything into it or to let herself develop any sort of feelings. She had 2 children to raise and a farm to save. Romance, if she ever wanted such a thing again, would have to wait until she was back on her feet financially. But as she went inside and prepared for bed, she could not quite stop herself from wondering what Sunday would bring. The next few days passed in their usual routine. Deanna rose before dawn to tend to the chickens and the single milk cow she had managed to keep. She worked in the garden, trying to coax vegetables from the stubborn soil. She washed clothes and mended torn garments and taught Samuel his letters while Lily played with corn husk dolls that Deanna had made for her. The food Ethan had purchased made an enormous difference. The children's hollow cheeks began to fill out slightly, and Deanna herself felt stronger with proper meals in her stomach. She found herself working with renewed energy, attacking tasks she had been putting off because she lacked the strength to complete them. On Saturday evening, after the children were asleep, Diana found herself looking through her meager wardrobe, trying to decide what to wear the next day when Ethan came to visit. She immediately felt ridiculous. The man was coming to fix her fence, not to court her. She would wear her usual work dress, the faded blue cotton that was patched in several places but still serviceable. But Sunday morning found her putting on her better dress, the green calico that Thomas had bought her for their second wedding anniversary. It was also worn and patched, but the color still brought out her eyes, and the fit was flattering to her slender figure. She told herself she was wearing it because it was Sunday, and one should look presentable on the Lord's day, even if they were too busy to attend church services. Samuel noticed immediately. "Mama, you look pretty," he said, his mouth full of biscuit and jam. "Thank you, sweetheart," Diana replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "Finish your breakfast and then I need you to help me tidy up the yard before Mr. Xavier arrives." They spent the morning making the place look as presentable as possible. Diana swept the porch and picked up the scattered toys and tools that had accumulated over the past weeks. Samuel carried water from the well to give to the dusty flowers Diana had been trying to keep alive in the beds beside the house. Lily helped by not helping, getting in the way with the earnest enthusiasm of a 4-year-old. Ethan arrived just after noon, riding a handsome bay gelding and leading a pack horse loaded with tools and supplies. Diana watched from the porch as he approached, her heart inexplicably beating faster. He had cleaned up since she saw him last, his clothes freshly washed and his dark hair still damp, curling slightly in the heat. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Oakes," he called out as he dismounted. "I hope I am not too early." "Not at all, Mr. Xavier," Diana replied, walking down to meet him. "We have been expecting you." Samuel hung back, watching the stranger with suspicious eyes, but Lily had no such reservations. She toddled forward, reaching up to touch the bay gelding's velvety nose. "Pretty horse," she announced. "Her name is Copper," Ethan said, kneeling down to Lily's level. "And you must be Miss Lily. Your mama told me about you." Lily beamed at the attention, and Diana felt something in her chest tighten. Thomas had been wonderful with the children, always making time to play with them despite the demands of running the ranch. Seeing another man showing them kindness reminded her painfully of everything they had lost. "And you must be Samuel," Ethan said, straightening up and extending his hand to the boy. "I have heard you are a big help to your mother." Samuel looked at the offered hand for a long moment before finally shaking it. "I try to be," he said quietly. "That is all any of us can do," Ethan replied seriously, treating the boy with the same respect he would afford an adult. "Try our best." "Now, your mother mentioned something about a fence that needs mending, the north pasture," Diana said, pointing toward the overgrown fields. "Several posts came loose during the last big storm. I managed to prop them up temporarily, but they need to be set properly." "Let me take a look," Ethan said. "Samuel, would you like to come with me and show me where the damage is? I could use a knowledgeable guide." Samuel glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. The boy puffed up slightly with pride at being asked to help, and Diana felt grateful to Ethan for including him. Samuel had been trying so hard to be the man of the house, but he was only 6 years old, and the weight of that responsibility was far too heavy for such small shoulders. Diana watched them walk toward the pasture together, Samuel talking animatedly and gesturing at various points along the fence line. Lily tugged at her skirt. "Mama, can we make cookies for Mr. Ethan?" Diana looked down at her daughter's hopeful face and felt her resolve soften. "That is a lovely idea, sweetheart. Let us go inside and see what we can do." They spent the next hour in the kitchen, Lily helping by making a mess with the flour while Deanna mixed up a simple sugar cookie dough. As she worked, Deanna could see Ethan and Samuel through the window, working on the fence posts. Ethan had stripped off his shirt in the heat, and Diana found her eyes drawn to the lean muscles of his back as he swung a sledgehammer to drive the posts deeper into the hard ground. She quickly looked away, feeling her face flush. It had been so long since she had thought of a man in that way, and the sudden awareness of Ethan as an attractive man rather than simply a helpful neighbor flustered her. By the time the cookies were in the oven, Ethan and Samuel were returning to the house. Samuel was chattering excitedly about all the things Ethan had taught him about setting fence posts, and Diana's heart warmed at the happiness in her son's voice. "We got 6 posts set properly," Ethan said, accepting the glass of cool water Deanna offered him. "The rest will need replacement lumber, but those 6 should hold for now. And Samuel here was an excellent assistant. He has a real knack for this kind of work." Samuel practically glowed under the praise, and Deanna felt tears prick her eyes at the sight. Her son needed this kind of male attention and approval, and she could not provide it no matter how hard she tried. "That is wonderful," Deanna said. "I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Xavier. Please, will you stay for supper? It is the least I can do after all your hard work." Ethan hesitated, and Deanna worried she had been too forward. "I would not want to impose, Mrs. Oakes." "It is no imposition," Deanna assured him. "We have fresh cookies cooling, and I was planning to make chicken and dumplings. There is more than enough for everyone." "In that case, I would be honored," Ethan said, his smile reaching his eyes. "And please, Mrs. Oakes, I wish you would call me Ethan." "All this formal address makes me feel ancient." Deanna laughed, the sound surprising her with its spontaneity. "Only if you call me Deanna. Mrs. Oakes makes me feel like a school teacher." "Deanna it is, then," Ethan said, and the way he said her name, soft and respectful, sent an unexpected warmth through her. Supper was a lively affair. Lily immediately claimed the seat next to Ethan, chattering at him about her dolls and the chickens and anything else that popped into her head. Samuel was more reserved but clearly warming up to their guest, especially when Ethan asked him about his father and listened with genuine interest as the boy shared memories of Thomas. Deanna served the chicken and dumplings, along with fresh biscuits and the last of the preserves. Ethan ate with obvious appreciation, complimenting her cooking in a way that made her feel proud. It had been a long time since anyone had noticed her efforts in the kitchen. After supper, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan helped Diana clear the table while the children played outside. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying the dishes. "You have wonderful children," Ethan said as he dried a plate. "They are a credit to you and your late husband." "Thank you," Deanna replied, her hands stilling in the wash water. "They are the reason I keep going, even when everything else seems hopeless. I have to make sure they have a future, that they do not lose their home the way I lost mine when I was a child." "You lost your home?" Ethan asked gently. Deanna nodded, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "My father was a farmer in Missouri. When I was 12, a drought destroyed our crops 3 years in a row. We lost everything. My parents died within a year of each other, my father from pneumonia and my mother from a broken heart. I ended up living with an aunt who made it very clear I was a burden. When Thomas came along and wanted to marry me, I jumped at the chance to have a home of my own again. I will not let my children go through what I went through. I will not lose this place." The fierce determination in her voice must have been clear, because Ethan set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. "You will not lose it, Deanna. I meant what I said about helping you, and I have some ideas that might help you get back on your feet financially." Deanna turned to look at him, hope and skepticism warring in her chest. "What kind of ideas?" "The double R is always looking for eggs and butter," Ethan said. "I know you have chickens and a milk cow. If you could increase your production, I could arrange for the ranch to buy from you at a fair price. It is not much, but it would be steady income." "I cannot afford to buy more chickens," Deanna said, her hope deflating. "What if I could arrange a loan from Mr. Reynolds?" Ethan asked. "He is a good man, and I know he would be willing to help. You could pay him back from the profits once you are established." Diana wanted to say yes immediately, but years of hardship had taught her caution. "Why would you do all this for me? You do not even know me." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft and sincere. "Because I know what it is like to have nothing and no one to help. When I was 18, my parents died in a house fire. I lost everything, including my 2 younger sisters. If someone had been there to help me, maybe things would have turned out differently. Maybe I could have saved them." The pain in his voice was raw and real, and Deanna felt her heart break for him. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "I am so sorry, Ethan. That must have been terrible." "It was 10 years ago," Ethan said, looking down at their joined hands. "But I still think about them every day, about what I could have done differently. Helping you, helping your children, maybe it is a way of making peace with the past. Does that make any sense?" "Perfect sense," Deanna whispered. They stood there in the dimming kitchen, hands touching, something profound passing between them in the silence. The moment was broken by Lily running into the house, demanding cookies. Ethan and Deanna pulled apart, both slightly flustered. But as the evening continued and Ethan finally prepared to leave, Deanna felt something had shifted between them. Some invisible barrier had been crossed. "I will talk to Mr. Reynolds tomorrow about the egg and butter arrangement," Ethan said as he mounted Copper. "And I will come by next Sunday to finish the fence work if that is acceptable." "That would be wonderful," Deanna said, holding Lily's hand while Samuel stood beside her. "Thank you again, Ethan, for everything." "It is my pleasure, Deanna," Ethan replied, his eyes meeting hers in the twilight. "Truly." As Deanna watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, she felt that small flicker of hope from days ago grow into something brighter, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. The following week, Ethan was as good as his word. On Tuesday, a representative from the Double R Ranch arrived at Deanna's door with a proposal. They would purchase all the eggs and butter she could produce at prices that were better than what she could get in town. Additionally, Mr. Reynolds was extending her a small loan to purchase more chickens and some supplies for improving her dairy production, with repayment terms that were more than fair. Diana felt overwhelmed by the generosity. That afternoon, she hitched up Buttercup and drove into Eagle Pass to speak with Mr. Whitley about purchasing chickens. The merchant's attitude toward her had changed dramatically since Ethan had paid her account. He was almost obsequiously polite, helping her select healthy hens and even throwing in some extra feed at no charge. As Deanna loaded the crates of chickens into her cart, she noticed several of the town women watching her with curious expressions. She knew what they were thinking, what they would be whispering about. The widow Oakes had found herself a protector, and they were speculating about the nature of that relationship. Deanna held her head high as she drove home. Let them talk. She knew the truth. Ethan was simply a kind man helping a neighbor in need. The fact that she found herself thinking about him constantly, that she looked forward to Sunday with an eagerness that had nothing to do with getting her fence fixed, was her own private business. The new chickens settled in quickly, and Deanna threw herself into increasing her production. She woke even earlier than before, collecting eggs and churning butter, determined to prove that Ethan's faith in her was not misplaced. Samuel helped eagerly, and even little Lily did her part by scattering feed for the hens. When Sunday came around again, Diana tried not to show her excitement. She told herself it was simply because she would finally get the fence completely repaired, not because she would see Ethan again. But she could not quite explain why she spent extra time on her hair, pinning it up in a style she had not worn since before Thomas died, or why she wore her second-best dress instead of her work clothes. Ethan arrived mid-morning this time, and Diana's heart did a foolish little skip when she saw him. He was leading a different pack horse today, this one loaded with fresh lumber for the fence posts. "I brought everything we will need to finish the job properly," Ethan announced, dismounting with easy grace. "Where are my favorite helpers?" Samuel came running, and Lily was right behind him, both children clearly thrilled to see Ethan again. Diana watched them swarm around him, chattering about the new chickens and all the eggs they had collected, and felt her chest tighten with emotion. "Sounds like you have been busy," Ethan said, his eyes finding Diana's over the children's heads. "That is wonderful news." They fell into an easy pattern. Ethan and Samuel worked on the fence while Diana tended to her chores, with Lily alternating between helping her mother and wandering out to watch the men work. Around midday, Diana brought out sandwiches and lemonade, and they all sat in the shade of the barn to eat. "The Double R representative said you made the first egg and butter delivery last week," Ethan said, accepting the sandwich Diana offered. He was very impressed with the quality. "I did my best," Diana replied, feeling pleased. "The extra chickens have already made a big difference. I think by next month I will be able to start making payments on the loan." "There is no rush," Ethan assured her. "Mr. Reynolds is more interested in helping you succeed than in getting his money back quickly." "Still, I do not like being in debt," Diana said. "I want to be independent again, to provide for my children without relying on charity." "It is not charity, Diana," Ethan said gently. "It is an investment, and from where I am sitting it looks like a very sound one." They worked through the afternoon, and by the time the sun began its descent, all the fence posts were properly set and secure. Ethan stood back, surveying their work with satisfaction. "That should hold for years now. You have good land here, Diana. With some work, this could be a profitable operation again." "That is my dream," Diana admitted. "To make this place what Thomas always wanted it to be, to give my children the kind of stable home I never had." "You will do it," Ethan said with such confidence that Diana almost believed him. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Diana felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "I do not feel very strong most of the time. I feel like I am barely holding things together." "That is what strength is," Ethan replied, "keeping going even when you feel like falling apart. Anyone can be strong when things are easy." As had become customary, Diana invited Ethan to stay for supper, and he accepted. This time she had made a pot roast with vegetables from her garden, and she felt proud of how the meal turned out. Over supper, Ethan entertained them with stories from his work at the Double R, carefully editing out anything too rough or frightening for the children's ears. After the children were in bed, Diana and Ethan sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. The night was warm and still, filled with the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. "Can I ask you something personal?" Diana said after a long, comfortable silence. "Of course," Ethan replied. "Why have you never married?" "A man like you, with a good position and clear prospects, most women would consider you quite a catch." Ethan was quiet for so long that Diana worried she had overstepped. Finally, he spoke. After my parents and sisters died, I spent years drifting from place to place. I could not settle anywhere, could not let myself get close to anyone. The pain of losing them was so intense that I was afraid to care about anyone again. By the time I finally made peace with the past enough to consider building a future, I was in my late 20s and set in my ways. Most women interested in marrying want younger men, ones who have not accumulated quite so much emotional baggage. I do not think that is true at all, Deanna said softly. I think the right woman would see your experiences as evidence of depth and character, not baggage. Ethan turned to look at her, and even in the dim light from the house, Deanna could see the intensity in his eyes. And what about you, Deanna? Have you thought about marrying again? Diana's breath caught in her throat. I have been too busy trying to survive to think much about the future in those terms. And truthfully, the men who have shown interest in me since Thomas died have not been the sort I would want as a father to my children. They saw a struggling widow, not a person. They wanted a housekeeper and someone to warm their bed, not a partner. Then they were fools, Ethan said vehemently. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, who appreciates your strength and your dedication to your children. Someone who would consider himself lucky to be part of your life. The air between them felt charged, electric with possibilities. Deanna wanted to ask if Ethan saw himself as that someone, but she could not quite find the courage. Instead, she said, "Thank you, Ethan, for everything you have done for us. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it every time." "I know you do," Ethan replied, "and you are welcome every time." When Ethan finally left that night, Deanna stood on the porch long after his figure had disappeared into the darkness, her heart full of feelings she was not quite ready to name. The summer days stretched long and hot as June gave way to July. Ethan continued to visit every Sunday, always finding some task that needed doing around the farm. He repaired the sagging porch, fixed the loose shingles on the barn roof, and helped Diana set up a better system for her expanding chicken operation. Each visit brought them closer, their conversations growing deeper and more personal, their silences more comfortable. Diana found herself falling into something she had not thought possible after Thomas's death. At first, she felt guilty about her growing feelings for Ethan. Was 7 months long enough to mourn a husband? What would people say? But slowly, she came to realize that Thomas would not have wanted her to spend the rest of her life alone and miserable. He had loved her too much to wish that for her. Samuel and Lily had completely accepted Ethan as part of their lives. Samuel had started calling him Uncle Ethan without any prompting, and Lily would talk about him constantly during the week between visits. The children's happiness helped ease Deanna's guilt about moving forward with her life. One Sunday in mid-July, Ethan arrived with a special surprise. In addition to his usual horses, he was leading a young colt, all gangly legs and curious eyes. "I thought Samuel might like to have his own horse to train," Ethan explained as the boy's eyes went wide with wonder. "This little fellow was born on the Double R this spring, and Mr. Reynolds said Samuel could have him if his mother approved." Deanna looked at her son's hopeful face and felt her resolve crumble. "I think that would be wonderful if you are sure Mr. Reynolds can spare him." "He is sure," Ethan said, handing the lead rope to Samuel, "but you have to promise to take good care of him. A horse is a big responsibility." "I promise," Samuel said fervently, already stroking the colt's neck. "I will take the best care of him ever. Can I name him Lightning?" "You can name him whatever you want," Ethan said with a smile. "He is your horse now." Deanna watched her son lead the colt toward the barn, chattering to the animal about all the adventures they would have together. She felt tears sting her eyes and blinked them away quickly. "That was incredibly generous," she said to Ethan. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to," Ethan replied. "Samuel is a good boy and he deserves something that is entirely his own. Besides, every cowboy needs a horse." They spent the afternoon teaching Samuel the basics of horse care, and Diana marveled at Ethan's patience with her son. He never talked down to the boy, always explaining things clearly and answering even the most basic questions with respect. That evening, after the children were in bed and they were sitting on the newly repaired porch, Diana decided it was time to address the feelings that had been building between them for weeks. "Ethan," she began, her heart pounding, "I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, his expression attentive. "I am listening. These past months, having you in our lives, it has meant more to me than you can possibly know. You have not just helped me financially and with the repairs around the farm. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever. You have given me hope." "Diana," Ethan said softly, reaching for her hand. "Please let me finish," Diana continued, her fingers tightening around his. "I never thought I would have feelings for another man after Thomas died. I loved him so much and losing him nearly destroyed me. But you have made me realize that the heart has more capacity for love than I ever imagined, that it is possible to honor the past while still embracing the future." "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with emotion. Diana took a deep breath. "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Ethan Xavier. I know it has only been a few months and maybe it is too soon, but I cannot keep pretending that what I feel is just gratitude or friendship. It is so much more than that." Ethan stood up, pulling Diana to her feet. In the moonlight, his eyes shone with unshed tears. "Diana, I have been in love with you almost from the first moment I saw you in that store, so proud and determined even in the face of humiliation. Everything I have done, every Sunday I have found an excuse to come here. It has all been because I could not stay away from you. But I did not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated to me because of the help I had provided." "I do not feel obligated," Diana whispered. "I feel grateful and cherished and for the first time in months, truly happy." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "May I kiss you, Diana, please?" she breathed. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise rather than passion. It was a beginning, not a culmination, and Diana felt her heart open like a flower toward the sun. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I know we should probably take things slowly," Ethan said, resting his forehead against hers. "Court properly, give people time to adjust to the idea of us together." "Probably," Diana agreed. "But I am tired of being cautious and afraid. I have spent the last year just trying to survive. I want to live again, Ethan, with you." "Then we will figure it out together," Ethan promised. "Whatever comes, we will face it as a team." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about the future with an openness that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Ethan wanted to marry her, but he agreed they should wait at least until the first anniversary of Thomas's death had passed, both out of respect and to avoid too much gossip. In the meantime, he would continue his Sunday visits, and Diana would continue building up her egg and butter business. The next months passed in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. Diana's business grew steadily, and by August, she was able to make her first loan payment to Mr. Reynolds ahead of schedule. The ranch was beginning to look cared for again, the result of both Diana's tireless efforts and Ethan's consistent help. The people of Eagle Pass began to accept that the Widow Oaks and the foreman from the Double R were courting. There was some gossip, of course, particularly among those who thought Diana should have mourned longer, but most people were happy for them. Mr. Whitley, always sensitive to where the wind was blowing, made a point of being especially friendly to Diana whenever she came into the store. In September, as the brutal Texas summer began to give way to cooler autumn temperatures, Ethan took Deanna into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, their first real public outing as a couple. Deanna wore her best dress, the one she had been married in, altered and updated as much as her limited sewing skills allowed. She felt nervous and excited, like a young girl on her first courting outing rather than a widow of 25 with 2 children. The evening was perfect. Ethan was attentive and charming, and Diana felt beautiful under his appreciative gaze. They talked and laughed, sharing stories and dreams, building the foundation for their future together. As they were leaving the restaurant, they ran into Mr. Reynolds, Ethan's employer. Deanna had never formally met the man, though she knew him by reputation as one of the most successful ranchers in the area. "Mrs. Oakes," Reynolds said, tipping his hat. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you properly. Ethan here talks about you and your children constantly." "All good things, I hope," Deanna said, smiling at Ethan's slight embarrassment. "Nothing but," Reynolds assured her. "And I must say the quality of the eggs and butter you have been providing is exceptional. I was talking with some of the other ranchers, and several of them are interested in buying from you as well if you can increase your production." Diana felt a thrill of excitement. "I believe I could with some additional investment in livestock." "Come by my office this week," Reynolds said. "I think we can work something out that would benefit both of us." As they drove home in Ethan's wagon, Deanna could hardly contain her excitement. "Did you hear that? Other ranchers want to buy from me. Ethan, if this works out, I could actually make the farm profitable again." "I knew you could do it," Ethan said, his pride in her clear in his voice. "You just needed a chance to show what you were capable of." "A chance you gave me," Deanna said softly. "None of this would have been possible without you." "We helped each other," Ethan corrected. "You gave me something just as valuable as what I gave you. You gave me a family, a reason to put down roots and build a real life instead of just drifting from job to job. You gave me purpose, Deanna." As October approached and the anniversary of Thomas's death loomed, Deanna felt both sadness and anticipation. She would always love Thomas and miss him, but she was ready to move forward with Ethan. On the anniversary itself, she visited Thomas's grave with the children, placing wildflowers on the simple wooden cross that marked his resting place. "Your papa was a good man," Deanna told Samuel and Lily. "He loved you both very much, and he would be proud of how strong and helpful you have been this past year." "You think Papa would like Uncle Ethan?" Samuel asked, his small hand in his mother's. Deanna felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were not entirely sad. "I think he would like him very much. I think he would be happy that we have someone to take care of us." "I think so too," Samuel said seriously. "Uncle Ethan is nice, and he makes you smile again, Mama." Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Ethan arrived at the farm. He had given Deanna space during the day, understanding that she needed time alone with her memories and her children. But now he was here, and Deanna was grateful for his presence. They sat on the porch, her head resting on his shoulder, watching the stars. "I said goodbye to Thomas today," Deanna said quietly. "Not forever, never forever, but I said goodbye to my life with him and hello to whatever comes next." "And what do you want to come next?" Ethan asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. Diana lifted her head to look at him. "I want to marry you, Ethan Xavier. I want to build a life with you, raise our children together, grow old watching sunsets from this porch. If you will still have me." Ethan's response was to pull a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing fancy but clearly chosen with care. "I have been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Deanna Oakes, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Yes, Deanna said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, absolutely yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they sealed the promise with a kiss that was deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "How soon can we get married?" he asked. "Because now that you have said yes, I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." "Soon," Deanna promised. "As soon as we can arrange it." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Eagle Pass. Deanna wore a new dress that Ethan had insisted on buying her, a beautiful cream-colored silk that made her feel like a princess. Samuel stood up with Ethan as his best man, so proud and serious in his new suit. Lily was the flower girl, scattering petals with enthusiastic abandon. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Diana felt a completeness she had thought she would never experience again. As Ethan kissed her, she heard Samuel and Lily cheering, along with the small gathering of friends and neighbors who had come to witness their union. The reception was held at the farm, with neighbors bringing food and drink. Mr. Reynolds gave a toast, welcoming Deanna officially into the Double R family. Even Mr. Whitley showed up with a gift, a set of fine china that must have cost more than Deanna had ever owed him in credit. As the sun set and the guests began to drift away, Deanna stood with Ethan, watching Samuel teach Lily how to lead Lightning around the yard. "This is everything I never knew I could have again," she said softly. "Thank you for finding me that day in the store. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for taking a chance on a scarred cowboy who did not know if he could ever love again," Ethan replied, pulling her close. "You healed something in me I thought was broken beyond repair." That night, after the children were asleep in their beds, Deanna and Ethan began their life together as husband and wife. Their loving was tender and passionate, a joining not just of bodies but of hearts and souls. Afterward, lying in Ethan's arms in the bed she had once shared with Thomas, Deanna felt no guilt, only rightness. This was where she was meant to be with this man, building this future. The following years were not without challenges, but Diana and Ethan faced them together. Ethan moved into the farmhouse, bringing with him not just his personal belongings but his considerable ranching expertise. Under his guidance and Diana's management, the small farm expanded and prospered. The egg and butter business grew so successful that Diana was able to hire help, 2 local women who were grateful for the steady work. In the spring of 1880, Diana gave birth to their first child together, a boy they named Elijah Thomas Xavier, honoring both his father and Diana's first husband. Samuel and Lily were thrilled with their baby brother, hovering over him constantly. Ethan proved to be as devoted a father to the new baby as he was to Samuel and Lily, whom he had legally adopted shortly after marrying Deanna. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Sarah Rose. The house was full of noise and laughter, so different from the desperate quiet that had filled it after Thomas's death. Deanna sometimes paused in her work to marvel at how drastically her life had changed, how close she had come to losing everything, and how a stranger's kindness in a general store had altered the course of her entire future. Samuel grew into a fine young man, skilled with horses, and already showing the same steady character that had marked his father. At 15, he was already turning heads among the young ladies of Eagle Pass, but he was focused on his studies and his work with the horses. Lightning, no longer a gangly colt but a fine gelding, was his constant companion. Lily, at 12, was as beautiful as her mother and as determined. She had announced her intention to become a teacher, and Diana and Ethan were saving money to send her to the teaching college in San Antonio when she was old enough. The younger children were growing up in a stability and security their older siblings had not known in their earliest years. Elijah was 4 now, already following his brother Samuel around the ranch and begging to be allowed to help with the horses. Little Sarah, at 2, was the darling of the family, spoiled by everyone but somehow remaining sweet-natured and kind. On a warm evening in May of 1884, 6 years after that fateful day in the general store, Diana and Ethan sat on their porch, which had been completely rebuilt and expanded. The farm sprawled around them, prosperous and well-maintained. In the distance, they could hear Samuel calling to the horses as he brought them in for the evening, and Lily's laughter as she played with the younger children in the yard. "You ever think about that day in the store?" Diana asked, her hand resting in Ethan's. "How different everything could have been." "I think about it all the time," Ethan admitted. "If I had arrived 5 minutes later, if I had decided not to speak up, if you had been too proud to accept help, so many things had to align perfectly for us to end up here." "I used to think my life was over when Thomas died," Diana said softly. "I thought the best I could hope for was survival. I never imagined I could be this happy again, that I could love again as deeply as I loved him. But you showed me that the heart is not a finite resource. That loving you does not diminish what I felt for Thomas. It just expands to make room for more. I spent 10 years after my family died thinking I was broken," Ethan said, "thinking that I had used up all my chances at happiness and family. But you and the children, you showed me that it is never too late to start over, to build something new from the ruins of the past." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Samuel had finished with the horses and was heading toward the house, Elijah riding on his shoulders. Lily was carrying Sarah, the little girl's arms wrapped around her big sister's neck. "Mama, Papa, supper time," Lily called out, and Diana smiled at the word. Lily had started calling Ethan Papa about a year after the marriage, and it never failed to make Ethan's eyes mist with emotion. As they all gathered around the big table Ethan had built when the family started expanding, Diana looked at each face lit by the warm glow of the oil lamps. Samuel, so tall and serious, already more man than boy. Lily, poised on the edge of young womanhood, smart and determined. Little Elijah with Ethan's green-blue eyes and Diana's dark hair. And baby Sarah, perfect and precious, giggling as her father made silly faces at her. This was her family, built from ashes and grief, kindness and courage. This was her home, saved from ruin by a cowboy's generosity and her own stubborn refusal to give up. This was her life, so different from what she had planned but infinitely precious. After supper, after the children were bathed and put to bed, Diana and Ethan returned to the porch. The night was warm and still, full of the sounds of crickets and the distant howl of coyotes. Ethan pulled Diana close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, horse and leather and home. "I love you, Ethan Xavier," Ethan murmured into her hair. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Diana replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. "Thank you for paying my account that day, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for giving me a future when I thought I had none." "Thank you for letting me into your life," Ethan said. "For trusting me with your heart and your children, for making me part of a family again." They stayed there long into the night, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had built something beautiful from desperation and hope. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, and somewhere in the house, One of the children cried out in sleep and then settled again, soothed by the knowledge that they were loved and safe. Deanna thought about the woman she had been that day in the store, desperate and humiliated, facing the real possibility of losing everything. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that help was coming in the form of a quiet cowboy with kind eyes, that her story was not ending but beginning, that the best chapters were yet to be written. But of course, she could not go back, and perhaps that was for the best. If she had known then how things would turn out, she might not have appreciated fully the miracle of it all. The journey from despair to joy, from loneliness to love, from widow to wife, each step had been necessary to bring her to this moment, this place, this life. As autumn arrived and the children returned to school, Diana found herself expecting again. At 30 years old, she had not planned on another pregnancy, but she welcomed it nonetheless. Ethan was overjoyed at the news, already planning additions to the house to accommodate their growing family. This pregnancy was easier than her others had been, perhaps because she was not carrying it alone, not weighed down by worry and fear. Ethan was attentive and supportive, taking over more of her chores as her belly grew. Samuel and Lily helped with the younger children, and Deanna marveled at how her firstborns had grown into such capable, caring people. In early March of 1885, Diana gave birth to twin boys, a surprise that left everyone delighted and slightly overwhelmed. They named them James and Joseph, and the house became even more chaotic and joyful. Ethan hired additional help for both the house and the farm, determined that Diana should be able to enjoy her babies rather than being exhausted by the demands of caring for them alone. The years continued to unfold, each bringing its own challenges and blessings. There were hard times, seasons when the weather did not cooperate or when illness struck the household. But there were no more moments of true desperation, no more standing in stores being refused credit, no more lying awake wondering how she would feed her children the next day. Samuel left home at 18 to attend agricultural college, determined to bring the latest ranching techniques back to the family operation. Deanna cried when he left, her first baby now a man, but she was proud of his ambition and determination. He returned 2 years later with a degree and a pretty young wife named Margaret, who fit into the family as if she had always been there. Lily did become a teacher, just as she had planned, but she taught at the local school in Eagle Pass, so she could remain close to home. She married a kind young doctor when she was 22, and they built a house just down the road from the farm. Deanna loved having her daughter so close, loved watching Lily navigate her own marriage and eventually motherhood. The younger children grew up in abundance rather than scarcity, never knowing the desperate poverty their older siblings had experienced in those dark months after Thomas's death. Elijah, James, and Joseph all grew tall and strong, working alongside their father on the ranch, which had expanded to include cattle along with the egg and butter operation. Sarah became her mother's helper in managing the business side of things, showing an aptitude for numbers that surprised everyone. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Diana with a trip to San Antonio, their first time away from the farm together since their honeymoon. As they walked through the bustling city, so different from the quiet of Eagle Pass, Diana reflected on the decade that had passed since their wedding day. 10 years, she said, squeezing Ethan's hand. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Best 10 years of my life, Ethan replied, pulling her close to kiss her temple. Here is to 50 more. They returned home to find the children and Samuel's wife had organized a surprise party, inviting neighbors and friends to celebrate. Mr. Reynolds was there, now in his 70s but still sharp and engaged. Even Mr. Whitley came, bringing an expensive gift and congratulations. As Deanna looked around at the gathering, at the life she and Ethan had built together, she felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought of Thomas, hoped he could see how well his children had turned out, how happy they were. She hoped he approved of the man who had stepped in to help raise them, who loved them as his own. The party continued late into the evening with music and dancing and laughter. Deanna danced with Ethan under the stars, the same stars that had watched over her during her darkest days and her brightest moments. As the music swirled around them, she whispered, "I would go through it all again, every hard moment, every desperate day if I knew it would lead me here to you, to this life." "So would I," Ethan murmured back. "Every heartbreak, every loss, it all brought me to that store on that particular day, at that exact moment when you needed help and I needed purpose. It brought me to you." They continued to dance, two souls who had found each other across the vast landscape of loss and loneliness, who had built a love story from the ashes of grief and the seeds of kindness. Their children and grandchildren would tell the story for generations to come, the story of how a cowboy paid a widow's account and ended up paying for so much more, a future filled with love, a family bound by more than blood, a legacy of generosity and courage. As the years continued to pass, Deanna and Ethan grew old together, their love deepening and maturing like fine wine. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, weathered droughts and celebrated abundant harvests. Through it all, they remained each other's anchor and safe harbor. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Samuel, now a father of 3 himself, and managing the ranch alongside Ethan, organized a grand celebration. All of Deanna's children and grandchildren gathered, filling the large house that had been expanded multiple times over the years to accommodate the growing family. There were 23 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and the ranch had become one of the most prosperous operations in the region. Diana stood on the porch that evening, Ethan's arm around her waist, looking out at the land they had built together. Her hair was now streaked with gray, and her hands showed the marks of a lifetime of hard work, but she had never felt more beautiful or blessed. 25 years, Ethan said, echoing her thoughts from their 10th anniversary. Where did the time go? Into this, Deanna replied, gesturing at the house full of family, the prosperous ranch, the legacy they had created together. Every moment, every day, building something that will outlast us both. Do you remember that frightened widow who stood in Whitley's store trying to hold onto her dignity while her world was falling apart? Ethan asked softly. I remember her, Deanna said, but sometimes it feels like she was a different person, living a different life. She was brave, Ethan said. Braver than she knew. She just needed someone to see it, to believe in her. And you did, Deanna replied, turning to face her husband. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. You gave me back my future. We gave each other a future, Ethan corrected. I was as lost as you were, Deanna, just in a different way. You gave me a reason to stop running, to put down roots, to build something permanent. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You saved me as much as I saved you. As the celebration continued around them, as their children and grandchildren laughed and played and created memories of their own, Deanna and Ethan stood together watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant colors. This was their legacy, not just the prosperous ranch or the successful business, but the family they had built together, the love they had nurtured, the second chances they had embraced. The story that had begun with refusal and humiliation in a small general store had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. It had taken courage to accept help when pride wanted to refuse it, courage to love again when grief said it was impossible, courage to build a future when the present seemed hopeless. But Diana had found that courage with Ethan by her side. Together they had created something precious and lasting, a love story for the ages, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and the resilience of the human heart. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Diana leaned into Ethan's embrace, grateful for every moment that had brought them to this place, this time, this life. The cowboy who had paid her account had given her so much more than money or credit. He had given her hope, love, and a future brighter than anything she had dared to dream. And that, Diana thought as she kissed her husband under the vast Texas sky, was worth more than all the gold in the world.